Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Speaking slowly to make sure that this is all going correctly. Great. Welcome, everyone, to Facebook Live. I am looking forward to a series of important conversations that we're going to be having this week. The topic is how we can work together to make our communities safer from gun violence. There is a lot of conversation about all of the critical issues that we're dealing with in the world right now, and they're all really important. We're in the middle of the worst surge of the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, international affairs have our attention, but the public health crisis and the things that we're seeing play out in Afghanistan, the earthquake and now flooding in Haiti, nothing happening anywhere in the world has stopped the pre-existing epidemic of gun violence in our country. And we have to focus on everything that is drawing our attention, but we cannot take our attention away from the gun violence epidemic. There's been an increase in gun violence over the past 18 months, 30% increase in homicides, an 8% increase in gun assaults in large cities. Last year, in the first quarter of 2021, homicides were 24% higher than the first quarter last year. Recent spikes in gun violence have pushed the daily gun death toll to 120 people every single day in 2021. As of Sunday, 27,683 Americans have been killed by guns. There have been more than 430 mass shootings. And to highlight how we can respond together now, how we can make this issue, push this issue, force this issue into the center of our debate, I wanted to bring in voices of survivors, parents and spouses of those who died on February 14th, 2018 at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, young student survivors and advocates who are leading the movement for change across the country. And today we're starting with a discussion of red flag laws, the Eagles Act, and gun buyback programs. And we're going to start our first conversation on these important issues with my guests, Tony Montalto and Debbi Hixon. Tony, and there they are. Hey, Tony and Debbi. Tony Montalto is the president of Stand with Parkland, the National Association of Families for Safe Schools. That's an organization founded by the 17 families who lost loved ones in Parkland at the school massacre on February 14th, 2018. In addition to founding Stand with Parkland and serving as its president, Tony is a captain with Major U.S. Airline, where he has flown for over 30 years. He's also held numerous committee positions in the Airline Pilots Association, helping other pilots. And Tony is here because he's committed to this after Gina's life was taken at Stoneman Douglas. Debbi Hixon is there. Hi, Debbi. Debbi is a countywide school board member in Broward County. She is a 32-year veteran teacher, was elected to the school board in 2020. She is the wife of Chris Hixon and mother of two boys, Thomas and Corey. Chris was gunned down at Stoneman Douglas, and Debbi serves as the president of the Chris Hixon Athletic Scholarship, which is dedicated to the memory of her husband, who was the coach at Stoneman Douglas High School and lost his life while trying to disarm the shooter. She's on the board of Stand with Parkland and is the vice president of 4F Now, an organization that partners with local law enforcement to host voluntary gun buyback programs. I want to thank you both for being with us today. I want to thank you for the remarkable way that you honor the memories of Gina and of Chris, and for your efforts every day to reduce gun violence. With that, I will turn it over to you, Tony, for anything you'd like to say, and then Debbi, I'll go to you after Tony, and then we'll have some conversation. Tony, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, Ted, thanks for having us on. We know that you've been working for a very long time in the gun violence prevention space, and Stand with Parkland, the National Association of Families for Safe Schools, isn't per se a gun violence prevention group. We are a school safety group. We're uniquely inclusive and nonpartisan. And we look at school safety in a little bit more of a holistic way than many others. And that is securing the campus, better mental health screening and support programs, and finally, responsible firearms ownership. All three of those things failed our families on that terrible day in February of 2018. They all push and pull on one another to make our schools safer. And that's why we believe that we need to look at all those aspects together. So thanks for having us again today.
You're on mute, Ted.
I am. The Zoom is new for me. So Debbie, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks so much for being with us. And Tony, thanks for your comments as well. Debbie.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And thank you, Ted, for inviting Tony and I to come today to talk about what we can do to help reduce gun violence in our nation. As you mentioned, I am part of the board of Stand with Parkland, but I am also the vice president of 4F Now, which means fewer firearms, fewer funerals. And we have been successful in hosting voluntary gun buybacks in both Coral Springs and Hollywood, and are in negotiations now to do another gun buyback. And really the idea of those for us is to get unwanted guns off the streets and to just bring awareness to why gun violence, how we can prevent gun violence and why it's an issue. You know, we live with the consequences of that every day. And it's really important for us as family members to make sure that we're doing what we can to not only honor those that we lost, but to help prevent this for other families.
Great. Thank you very much. So let's talk about some of these issues. One of the executive actions that President Biden took to reduce gun violence was to order the Department of Justice to draft model legislation for extreme risk protection orders that are sometimes referred to as red flag laws. Tony, you testified earlier this year before the Senate Judiciary Committee about this topic. Tell us why you support red flag laws, and most importantly, tell us how they can help keep our communities safe.
Well, red flag laws are an important part of the toolbox to help stop the problem of school shootings in particular. What they do is they allow law enforcement to protect themselves or others from people that have been deemed a threat to themselves or others. Right now, it's available in 19 states plus the District of Columbia. Prior to the shooting in Parkland, there were only 5 states. So we've seen states come to adopt these. And through research from the National Threat Assessment Center, which is part of the U.S. Secret Service, we've seen that most school shooters and other active shooters actually leak via social media or via telling somebody what their plans are. The red flag laws allow someone who hears that to go to law enforcement, report it. Law enforcement then investigates it. And if it's found to be necessary, the firearms are removed from that person. Here in Florida, our law says that within 2 weeks, there'll be a hearing. So their due process is carried out. And within that time frame, then it's determined whether or not the extreme risk protection order will be extended for a year or whether the firearms will be returned. So both pieces are very important. Having not only the recognition of the removal of the firearms, but also having the due process piece. Red flag laws are so effective because they not only touch on a firearms thing, they also touch on the suicides, which you spoke about earlier. Having firearm attempted suicide is exponentially more successful. So removing the firearms from somebody who's been deemed a threat to themselves will allow them time to get the help they need. And that is the object here, is not to punish anybody, but to allow them to remove the firearms and allow the individual to get the help they need before they resort to violence.
That's really helpful. Close to 15,000 suicides buy firearms already. And you mentioned, Tony, the fact that Florida passed a red flag law. And, Florida did that in 2018, shortly after the tragedy at Parkland. The state legislature and the governor, all Republican, under Republican control, sort of highlighting the fact that this isn't a partisan issue at all. You just touched on it, but if you could just again highlight some of these due process guardrails that can help us push back against the arguments that some have raised against these laws, and that our own state of Florida made a part of the law to ensure that it could pass here and start saving lives here. Can you just speak briefly to that for us?
So again, I can just speak to the Florida law because again, each state that's adopted one is a slightly different process. But here in Florida, again, it's investigated. Once the report comes in, it's investigated by the police. It's not just an immediate thing. It's investigated by the police. If the investigation finds that the report is accurate, then the firearms are removed. Then again, within 2 weeks, a short 2-week period, there's a full hearing in court, and the determination is made whether to continue the extreme risk protection order or whether to return the firearms. So back in 2019, we asked Senator Graham at the time, who was chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, to hold a hearing on this. And he did hold that hearing, true to his word, within 6 weeks. During that hearing, it became apparent that in most states, should someone be falsely accused and have this happen, they're inconvenienced for maybe 2 or 3 weeks at a time. Our families, my family, with the loss of my beautiful daughter, Gina, over my shoulder, Debbie's family, with the loss of her husband, and the other 15 families that suffered the loss of a loved one here in Parkland, live with the consequence of not having a red flag law eternally. So we think that as a practical matter, having it available to law enforcement to help protect our citizens is very important. And we do believe that the due process rights are important as well. I'd just like to close out on that subject. If you're done reading something that I put into the testimony, and said that we hope the 117th Congress doesn't continue to fail our citizens. We've seen our current president, who's a Democrat, and our past president, a Republican, both call for red flag laws. How many more lives need to be taken? How many more communities need to be traumatized like Parkland? And how many more families must be shattered before our elected leaders in Congress will respond? What will it take to get action out of both the House and the Senate to give the president something to sign? The answer should be not one more.
Tony, thanks. Thanks for your really powerful words. That's why we're doing this. The answer is not one more. And your words and your passion are really persuasive. And for those of us who had the opportunity, the privilege to get to know you and work with you and work with Debbie and work with so many others who are committed to this, it's frankly embarrassing that we're having this conversation and that this is not the law of our entire country at this point. So my hope is that those powerful words and the conversation today will help to propel us forward, because we can't afford to let this issue fall by the wayside. We just can't. So I appreciate that very much. Red flag law is a central piece of what we need to do to help keep our communities, our schools and communities safe. Next, Debbie, let me chat with you for a moment about gun buyback programs. You've worked on these gun buyback programs. Can you tell me about the project that you worked on?
Yeah, thank you. So when everything happened, it just felt like I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around and hope that somebody would make changes. I had to do something. And I came across an ad in the paper that they were doing a gun buyback in Miami. And so I reached out to the four communities that I felt most impacted by what happened at MSD, which was Parkland, Coral Springs, Hollywood, and Dania. And you may ask why Hollywood and Dania, but Chris and I live in Hollywood. He worked at South Broward for a very long time, and a lot of the community members in both of those cities were directly impacted by his loss as well. So I reached out to those police departments and said, can we do a gun buyback? I don't know how to do it. I don't know what it entails, but please, let's do something. Coral Springs answered me immediately. They had already been in touch with the 4F Now group, which were a group of dads from Parkland that had children that were not necessarily, impacted directly by what happened at MSD, but they were either at middle schools or at the school, and they wanted also to do something. So we partnered together with Coral Springs Police Department. And really, the police department does most of the heavy lifting there, right? They do all of the logistics and planning and how they're going to dispose of the weapons. And our job really was just to advertise it. And the first one we did went phenomenally well. We got over 200 weapons. And most people that came up said, thank you so much for hosting this. Some of them were older people that maybe had weapons left or firearms left because their husband or a family member had passed away and they just didn't know what to do with it. But there were some really compelling people that brought in rifles and AR-15s that said, I saw you advertise the gun buyback. I'm starting to have children, and I don't want them laying around my house anymore. I don't use them. I don't, have a need. I don't want to just sell them to somebody. This was an avenue for me to make sure that I was disposing of them properly. So there was a great thing. So then we reached out. Hollywood had also reached out, and similar idea, the people that were bringing them in, again, it's voluntary. So in our particular instance, we give away gift cards. It's been Publix, but whoever we can partner with to do gift cards. And we also have information about the safety locks, and also safes for people. So you may still have firearms at home. We don't think that we're getting guns out of criminals' hands when we do voluntary gun buybacks. It really is just about those firearms that may be laying around or in your car, or you're just not sure what to do with them, and a chance that someone may get them in the wrong hands and use them for something that they shouldn't. But it really is about education and just teaching people about the most responsible way to be a firearm owner. Lots of people think all firearms, we want to get rid of all firearms, and that isn't necessarily the case. We're just trying to help people be responsible with the firearms that they own.
It's a really important thing that we can do. I appreciate your involvement in these efforts. In Congress, I introduced the Buy Back Our Safety Act, which is legislation to assist in these efforts, provide federal grants so that local gun buyback programs across the country can expand. And we provide those grants to the Department of Justice. So we're working on that as well. And the education piece, I think, is really important, and not just the buyback piece, but making sure that people who come by these events can learn more about safety, and perhaps can also get a gun lock while they're there, or you mentioned the safe. These are all important parts of it. In South Florida this year, police departments in Boynton Beach and Miramar and North Miami have hosted these events, and we hope that there are more. And again, hopefully we'll be able to move legislation forward to provide a greater opportunity for even more communities to participate in these. Finally, let's talk about the Eagles Act. This is a bill that would expand the work. And Tony, you referenced the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center. You mentioned this earlier, and I think there's probably some confusion. I'd love you to help clarify this for people. Everyone knows what the Secret Service is. They know the Secret Service protects the president. I don't think most people are aware of the Threat Assessment Center or its relevance to keeping schools safe. But Stand with Parkland is a strong supporter of the Eagles Act. So if you could just speak a little bit about what the Threat Assessment Center does to help communities and law enforcement prevent school violence, and how does the bill support that mission? How can we do more to be effective here?
So I'll start off a little bit talking about what the bill does, and that is to reauthorize and provide additional funding to the National Threat Assessment Center. The National Threat Assessment Center is part of the U.S. Secret Service. Its chief is Dr. Alina Alathari. Her and her dedicated team do research into not only protecting our schools, but also into protecting our elected officials, our workplaces, our government buildings. They provide the basic building blocks upon which all those safety programs are connected. A major part of what they do is conducting a behavioral threat assessment. And that behavioral threat assessment looks at how people act, not how they look, but how they act. And then they bring together a group. And as far as schools go, the analysis group would be school professionals and administrators. It would be law enforcement, and it would be mental health professionals. And the object of this assessment is not to punish or to stigmatize, but it's to identify children who need help and get them the help they need before they resort to violence. And it's an extremely proactive process to prevent violence. The follow-on to the identification and the help is then the follow-on managed care to make sure that individual is continuing to get the help they need to be able to participate in society. So it's so vitally important to support their mission. They've continued to produce reports, and as a matter of fact, just earlier this spring, they released their latest report, which is averting targeted school violence. And in that, they listed the results of the study they performed. Some vital things that came out of that is that students are the ones who hear most when there is leakage, as I mentioned before. So we need to give them the ability to report the leakage they hear to a trusted source. This is a great place to leverage technology. Here in Florida, we created Fortify Florida. There's also various other companies that do this kind of thing or programs. We have Safe to Tell out of Colorado. We have Safer Watch here in the Fort Lauderdale area. Many of these companies allow anonymous reporting or text reporting, which is how kids communicate these days. Another vital thing that came out is the role of parents. And that's why Stand with Parkland is the National Association of Families for Safe Schools, because they do need the parents to be involved and be able to report what they hear. Another important piece was the fact that SROs on campus helped stop at least 66% of the attacks that they found here. So they are also a vital part in protecting our nation's schools. But again, that's a small part of what the National Threat Assessment Center does relating to schools. The Eagles Act, again, would authorize and reauthorize and provide them additional funding to not only do more research, but do more training out in the communities here and throughout our country that need this. And I'll just say that the Eagles Act is named for the mascot at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And we know that it's got bipartisan support. Representative Deutch and Representative Diaz-Balart introduced it here in the 117th Congress. It's also got bipartisan support in the Senate, and we're hopeful to see it move forward. And for as far as our families are concerned, there would be no better way to honor the loved ones who were taken that day than to have this bill pass and make other communities safer.
Well, Tony, thanks. As you know, it's a big priority of mine and Mario's, and is just one more way that we can help schools become safer places, identify potential threats and help people before something happens. That's why we have to do this. And just as we wrap up, I just want to point out the reason I'm doing these conversations is because this issue is too important for us to let it fall by the wayside. There are too many lives that have already been lost. There are too many lives at risk. And we started today, Tony, with you and Debbi with you, because it was important to help people understand it, that as we have these conversations, this isn't about partisanship and the high emotions that you see play out around some of these issues. These are all straightforward, bipartisan, common sense things we can do. Red flag laws have passed in states across the country, Democratic states, Republican states alike, and they're helping to save lives. The Buy Back Our Safety Act is a piece of legislation that simply aims to ensure that more police departments, more law enforcement agencies are in a position to take an action that will help get extra guns off of the streets, that will help educate people about gun safety. And the Eagles Act, Tony, as you just explained, is a bipartisan piece of legislation that will just help keep our schools, make our schools safer, and help save lives. We're going to have 4 more of these conversations as we go forward in the week, and the next one's going to be later this afternoon at 5 o'clock, and that one's going to be with Max Schachter and Gina and Tom Hoyer to discuss the Luke and Alex Safety Act and schoolsafety.gov. Again, continuing this conversation today about things that we can do to help keep schools safe and to help reduce gun violence, and that are just common sense. So I couldn't think of a better way to start these conversations than with you, Tony, and with you, Debbi. Thanks for joining for the first of a series of these conversations. I know both of you. I know this isn't easy. I know this is a really tough way to have to remember a loved one, but the work that you're both doing is so critically important to the future of our community and to our country. We're all immensely grateful for what you're doing, and I'll look forward to continuing to work with both of you and frankly everyone who wants to help take action to reduce gun violence and keep schools safe. Join us in the rest of these conversations, and let's make sure that this issue is where it belongs, right at the center of the conversation. And Tony, as you mentioned earlier, and it's a fine place for us to end, when we think about how many more families should have to suffer, how many more lives should have to be lost before we take meaningful action, the answer, Tony, as you so powerfully told the United States Senate, is not one more. And I stand with you on that. I know all of us in the community and all of us around the country who know you and appreciate what both of you are doing feel the same way. So thanks to both of you. Anything to wrap up? I want to make sure you guys have the last word if you'd like.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to plug standwithparkland.org.
Sure.
And as schools begin to start, please go to standwithparkland.org and take a look at our 5 questions that every family should ask to make sure that your school is prepared properly to receive your students and keep them safe. Again, that's standwithparkland.org and our 5 questions.
And I would just like to say thank you again for inviting us. These are important points. They are not political as far as we look at them. We find them to be important. We ask everyone to join us in Stand with Parkland, but in all of the other things that we are doing to just make sure that not just our schools are safe, but that our communities are safe. So thank you again for inviting us today.
Terrific. Debbi, Tony, thank you. Thanks everyone who joined in live or who will be watching later. Appreciate your interest and involvement. Tell the people that you know that we have to continue to focus on these issues because we owe it to our communities to help keep our kids and our families safe from gun violence. And with that, we will wrap up. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks again so much, Debbie, and thanks so much, Tony. Have a great afternoon.